Shut up and sit down.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is good, man. I'm fine with this.
All right. I'm Terra Walker, and that's Ted Bauer.
I'm wearing a different shirt today.
You are. You're not. Is that Mavericks?
Yeah, it's the same league, but it's a different shirt. So
Ah,
we'll
yeah.
see. We'll see how that goes from a Buck standpoint or whatever. Just this. Okay.
So today we're going to tackle unnecessary things that happen in meetings, or the fact that meetings just kind of in general are unnecessary, or
Yep, for
all of
sure.
the above.
I feel like meetings are one of the most hated things in the general business ecosystem lexicon. Everybody complains about them, but they don't actually seem to get any better that consistently. So we can talk about some problems within them and then some solutions to those problems. So I would say two things jump out initially. The first to me was always when I had corporate type jobs. So many people schedule so much of their day around meetings or calls that they're kind of like always racing from one to the next. So like they don't really ever have time to prepare for meetings because they're always in another meeting beforehand.
Right.
You get like all these people showing up to meetings who like don't really know what the meeting's about, which like when you factor in the 5 minutes of small talk that's going to be there, it's like, okay, you got that, and then like 10 minutes to try and figure out what it is. And if it was a scheduled 30-minute meeting, it's already 50% wasted, you know?
Right.
So that was always one of my first problems. My second thing is so many meetings got designed as like team updates or transparency, accountability, whatever. And all it becomes is everybody just listing their own to-do list. But it's like
Right.
that to-do list might not have anything to do with your work or what you're doing. So it's like irrelevant to most people in the room. It's just like X person over here is listing what they have to do. And it's like, well, why do I have to sit here and hear what 8 other people have to do? So
Right.
those were two of my biggest problems. And then I guess the third one that I've seen memes or T-shirts about this is that there's so many meetings that are called, especially in white collar, that could just easily be resolved with an email or like a DM or something. Like, hey, what's the update on this? Or like, where does this stand or whatever? And it doesn't need to waste all these people's 1 hour of time. So those would be my 3 major things about why I think they're usually ineffective. So like when you were in your meeting era, what were some things that stood out to you about how ridiculous they were?
I mean, things that are, mainly the calling of unnecessary meetings.
Yep.
The bringing of unnecessary teammates to the meetings. Like, if you're not essential, we don't need you. Letting one person take up everybody's time.
Yep.
You know,
That's
and
big.
making people sit there for, an hour or 2 or whatever with no break. I mean, we already know that sitting down is killing us, right?
Yep.
So,
Legitimately.
and you probably had to run from another meeting, but that's okay. Forget about potty breaks. Let's just sit here for another hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yep.
While everybody's dancing in their seat and no one's paying attention to what anybody's saying because everybody's got to pee or they're hungry or,
Right.
I mean, and there's no reason for the meeting.
Yep.
I honestly can't think of very many reasons that you would need an actual meeting longer than 10 or 15 minutes.
This is one of the most insane things ever. It's from like when I first started writing blogs. This is like a post I wrote probably 4 years ago. So this was a large insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
They did calculations, and you got to understand the math behind this. It's maybe a little bit spotty. But so there was a weekly senior leadership meeting, all right? And let's say they probably didn't meet around July 4th. They probably didn't meet around Christmas. So, like, let's say it was about 48 to 50 of these per year, right? So if you add up all the time that everybody associated in this company spent preparing for this meeting, going to this meeting, etc., it was 300,000 work hours in a year. So we're talking about, like, people spending 5 hours preparing a slide deck for these senior leaders to review or whatever. When you add all of it up, it was 300,000. So I just did that. 300,000 divided by like 365 days, even. That's the entire year of 34 people.
Yeah.
So, like, basically 34 people's entire year is going into this meeting, this one meeting between, like, high level guys.
Right.
So to your point, it's the same bullshit. Like, there's no reason that they really probably need to even meet every week,
Right.
like, they could probably meet monthly for 30 minutes and go over, like, financials or whatever,
Right.
and it would be much more effective. And now, because it's weekly, you have all these people in the middle running around, like, organizing charts and visuals and whatever, and that becomes their whole job. So it's like, like, just doesn't make any sense,
Right. And we have these things called project notebooks
Right.
for a purpose. They're
Right.
for project tracking. And
Yep.
sites like Asana and Slack, I don't think they're efficient. I'm not MeisterTask. I'm not a fan of any of them, and I've used them all.
Right.
They're all not as efficient as I would like them to be. But again, that's a better thing to have than a meeting about, here's the slide deck if you want to look at it.
Yep.
And here's where I'm at with this project. Anyway.
Yeah. So I wondered once, like, I was probably about 4 or 5 summers ago, I was working for some healthcare company in, like, an internship, like a graduate school internship type job.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered, like, Outlook is probably more popular for office email than Gmail is, but that might be changing. But, like, in Outlook, there should be a field when you go to create a meeting that literally asks you, like, what is the purpose of this? Why are you doing this? Why are you inviting these people? And if you can't type into that field, you shouldn't be allowed to create the meeting,
Right.
Like,
that's true.
yeah, like, so many meetings, to your point, could be an email, a survey. You could stop people in a hallway. You could, like, message them or whatever. It's like, it usually doesn't need to bring together a bunch of people who, to your point, like, probably have to pee, have been in meetings for, like, the last 6 hours. They don't even know what the hell's going on in this one. So I think the uselessness of it is probably where, like, our intersect or overlap is, So there are some people that do it right. I'll give you some examples that I have found in my days. So some company called LivePerson, which is a chat software provider, they decided that meetings would be a good opportunity for staff members to get to know each other better. So who's ever running the meeting, whoever has ownership of it, they pose a question at the start designed to get people out of their comfort zone. So you could ask, what are your doubts about something that you're working on? Or you could ask, like, a pop culture question, like a superhero question. The exercise was apparently so effective that the company shared the idea with customers. Some customers started using it. And then this one I like. We didn't touch on this in our complaints part, but one horrible thing about meetings is some leaders believe, like, oh, everybody has to participate, so they go around and try to get feedback from everybody, and then most people just say the thing that the last person said. So there's a company called Brevo, a security management software provider. They give everybody a red ping pong paddle when they go into a meeting, and if you raise the ping pong paddle, it means that you're rehashing something that somebody else just said, and then they have to stop talking and either throw it to another person or transition to another point. I thought that was cool. Granted, I don't know, like, you got to have a very specific culture where people feel comfortable with that, because that could freak some people out. especially introverts.
Yeah.
And this was cool too. Some vacation rental search engine like trip.com or something.
Uh-huh.
If it's a 30-minute meeting or an hour meeting, you set a stopwatch or an iPhone timer at the beginning of the meeting. If the meeting goes longer, whoever called the meeting has to throw $5 for every minute it went over into a beer jar.
That works.
I thought that was cool
That's
because then
awesome.
it's like, man, if you go 15 minutes over, you suddenly have $75 in this jar. And it's like, if you do that twice in a week, you have 150 a week. Let's say that happens for a month. That's $600 that you can take a team out to like a pretty nice happy hour, you know?
Right, because they put up with your bullshit meeting
Yeah.
running over for no fucking
It's
reason.
like, man, you kept running this meeting 15 minutes over. Well, you're gonna put a $600 tab at this bar near the office, and we're just gonna fill it, you know. Um, so okay, so yeah, like this is like on that notion of going over. I had forgotten this for a while, but it was like I went to a vendor meeting once at this company. It was like a third party trying to upsell some product to the
Right.
mid-level managers.
Right.
So the thing was budgeted for an hour. And so like in the beginning of the meeting, we spent like the first 15 minutes talking about the food on the table, the view from the room we were in, the weather, like how busy everybody was. Somebody made a couple jokes. So like we didn't start the meeting until 18 minutes into it. And like this vendor had a slide deck prepared for 1 hour, and now he has 42 minutes to do his thing. So
Right.
like they wanted to give the vendor credit, so we end up going 30 minutes over. So like I would respect that company and that specific meeting more if I knew like that's $150 towards a happy hour on the back end of it, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Yes.
sure. So those I thought were some decent ideas for how to improve them. I also just think what we were saying at the beginning about like just don't call them if they're not necessary. If you need the opinion or feedback of one person, go get that one person's feedback, and
Right.
don't like fucking call 8 people into a meeting, you know?
Right. And here's a novel idea, and we had this when I was working for GE, helping. They would consume these electrical supply places, get them on their inventory system, and then sell it back to the employees.
Yeah.
Right. And which is a brilliant thing for GE to do, because now there's a universal supply system for
Right.
that sort of thing. But
Right.
I went in as one of the coordinators for GE, and we had a messaging system. So more to your, like, obviously the company that you were talking about earlier that is a messaging system, like we used to back in the day, people would set up I don't remember what the heck it was called. I still say ping me because that's what you did, right?
Yeah.
But it was just this little chat down in your screen that, you know, a lot of companies use it. The boyfriend's company uses stuff like that where they can see you've gone inactive.
Yeah.
Right?
That's like, it's a little bit much, but
It is a little bit much, and I totally agree with you on that. But but to that end, you can you know, you can see if Joe what's his name's on to ask him a question, or you can shoot him an email. You don't have to call him or call a meeting with 90 people that sit around him.
Like one contract I'm on, they have like hip chat. And like, you know, that's one of those deals, you know.
And I know several companies. We did that in Quest when I worked for Dex. We did that in Quest. Of course, Joe Naccio was notorious for calling everybody to a stupid frickin' meeting, and we had to sit there and watch him talk for no reason for stuff that didn't have anything to do with us.
Right. Yeah, it's terrible. Oh, the other one I was thinking of was I wish just like, man, I once worked with some manager who like he on like Monday at 10 a.m. if you looked at his calendar, it would be completely blocked until Friday, and it's like mostly meetings, right?
Right.
So, so I'm just thinking to myself, like, the whole thing about preparation, like, I almost wish like companies set 30-minute meetings as 20-minute meetings and hour meetings as 50-minute meetings to give everybody that, like, go to the bathroom time,
Yeah.
go to the, like, prepare for what the hell the next thing you're walking into is.
Yep.
Because I remember when I was like pretty junior at ESPN, I called a meeting once to talk about some project, and like 2 mid to high level guys came up and were like, "What's this even about?" And that's actually like demoralizing, you know, especially if you're like a younger person.
Right.
And you want to believe like, "Oh, I could do something here, rise up here." And I don't think people think that way about, oh, you know, they just think like, shit, I'm in another meeting, like whatever. But
Right.
it's like, it's legit demoralizing for the people who are like the people who are calling it if they're junior. So I just wish there was like some type of prep time built in. Like, I would love to see people actually come to meetings and be like, I know what this is about. I know where we stand on this. I know what would be like a legitimately strategic idea, etc. But, you know, that does not seem normative.
And I still don't, like, I don't get, like, that's one culture, and it's not just corporate. I've worked for plenty of mom and pop businesses that do the same damn thing, and they call all 5 of us in, and 3 of us have nothing to do with what's going on, or could hear them from the other room while
Right.
they're doing their work.
Right. So do you think, like, because I've thought this sometimes, so you have so many people at all levels of work that are more concerned with the quantity of what they're doing than the quality of what they're doing.
Yes.
Do you think the reason that meetings have stuck around for so long, even though everybody seems to bitch about them, is because it just is a way to make us feel busier? Or like, when we feel busier, like, oh, we're constantly going to shit, a lot of people confuse that with productivity, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that to a lot of degrees that's true. I used to work for a company that we had first thing in the morning, Monday morning,
Yeah.
we met and went over what needed to happen for the week, what clients we got, what you know, widgets were going out the door that week, because it was a company that did we built rugged laptops for the police and fire departments and that sort of thing.
Right.
So first thing Monday morning, like, but it wasn't like we went over every single thing. Like, you got that order of 1,000, they're going out this week, right? Like, it was kind of like that, but all of that stuff could have been, you know, check marked off. And we had people in there that, on one hand, I think it's really important that everybody understands how the businesses are run. There's also a lot of things that aren't relevant. Like, I don't give 2 craps about what you're doing in HR this week unless it affects me.
Right. For sure. I don't either. That's the whole thing about just people listing their shit out that used to kill me. I'm on one right now with like some recruiting type company, and it's like every meeting is like that. It's like every meeting is like that shit, where it's like there's 10 people and everybody's just giving their fucking to-do list, you know? And you're like, oh God, like, I don't care about what 8 of these people have to say, but I still have to sit here for it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We used to, when I worked for Sears Roebuck and Company, when I was helping build the great indoors, our meetings were so quick. We'd get in there and be like, you got to do this and you got to do this, and we're done. And we were out within 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
You know, but it's construction, and everybody, I mean, we're all there. We all get it. We're there to build a building. Right? Like,
That's
what are you
good,
dying
man.
about over there?
No, it's like, what you're saying is legit and true. It's like, just fucking get in and get out. There's no point for this book. And then, okay, we didn't touch on this. I always found it sociologically interesting that, like, meetings, even when the people in them know that they're useless, they still somehow stretch to the time limit. Like, if you have a meeting set for an hour and at 15 minutes you've accomplished most of what needs to be said and you know that it's useless, why do people stay there for another 45 minutes?
Yeah,
Just
I don't
because
get it.
it's blocked for an hour? I've been in so many meetings like that, you know?
Right. And then these people wonder why they're behind or they're suddenly more busy. And it's because you
Right.
just fucked off for 45 minutes. You could have used that 45 minutes at least to make a to-do list to know what you have to do next.
Yeah. And then another thing that I kind of hate is how every business publication, when they're talking about meetings, they always bring up that Jeff Bezos Amazon 2 pizza rule thing. And I think like okay, I get it. Like 2 pizzas probably about 8 people, and 8 people seems like about the max for an effective meeting. Although one time I was on a federal government contract, and there was a conference call with 350 people on it. And if you can imagine, if you can imagine like how ridiculous that shit was in terms of like people not being on mute, you got all these dogs barking on different lines.
I would have gone nuts. Just them logging in, that beep when they get in the conference call would have just been annoying as fuck.
Oh my god! So my friend is like, so my friend is a federal government contractor, and he told me the story once about a similar size conference call, probably about 200 people. Again, I don't understand the purpose of a 200-person conference call, but he said it was getting so bad with like the dogs and the babies or whatever that some guy who wasn't on mute just screams out like, fuck this shit. And then you hear a click for like, Ron has exited the meeting or whatever. And like, the leader of it was like, oh, that's unfortunate. And then like 2 minutes later, Ron re-entered the meeting. He was like, oh, I'm really sorry about that. Just like couldn't take all the dogs barking. It's like, see, that to me is like, you would think that that's like fucking like out of a sitcom or like a bad movie, but that actually happens. And like, that's like a federal government job. Like, those people are making decisions with our tax money, and they're organizing 350-person conference calls, you know?
Why can't there be a phone tree? Didn't we used to have phone trees?
Yep.
Like, you call me and say, hey, your team needs to know this kind of stuff, and you also need to know that this other team's doing something that's going to affect what your team's doing, and I need you to notify your team. And then you go and call your underlings, your 4 underlings or 6 underlings, and go, hey, y'all need to tell your teams that this is happening and this is in the pipeline. And would that be not still effective?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would think so, but then I think where that dies or gets less effective is that so many people these days are hiding behind platforms. You know what I mean? So it's like they're not actively communicating, and they forget the fact that like posting something in a platform is not the same as like engaging with someone that works for you or needs to know information. So that's
I ignore those. I have clients that stick shit in Slack, and I ignore it because I get so many pings from Slack that are irrelevant to me. I ignore the pings.
For sure. Or
like, and then I miss everything that I'm needing to pay attention to. And then I get an irate phone call about how come you're not participating in Slack. Well, because you're notifying me of everything.
Yeah. Man, I was on a deal, and this is like very common among, this story is specific, but like I've had this happen in other spots. I was on a deal, and this guy who was high up there told me, okay, Slack is for everything. We use Slack for everything, right? And I'm like, cool. So on that one, I'm fucking checking Slack. And like, it's not a very active Slack channel for this company. And then I get blasted about something on a Thursday, and I'm like, well, what's the deal? And they're like, well, that shit was in Basecamp. I'm like, well, nobody fucking told me that you all check Basecamp all the time. So that's like part of the whole deal too, is like, if you're going to make a phone tree or any communication model work, you got to at least be consistent about, okay, this is where we communicate, this is where we put stuff. And then to your point, don't, like, the worst shit in Slack or Facebook Messenger groups is when people put you on every fucking thing. because then you're going to tune it out. And like you just said, you're going to miss like actual stuff that matters, you know? So you got to like be selective about like, I'm on one here. I'll even pull it up right now.
Do we know any programmers that can create this software for us? I think this is $1 billion idea, Ted. We need to sit down and say, this is what needs to happen to facilitate meetings, and make it available to do a thing like Google Hangouts where you can get 9 or 20 people on a call that are around the world, and you get the specific 9 people that you need to speak with, not, 900 people.
Yep.
I need to find a programmer that can do that, because
we should actually hunt one down, man. I'm sure there are suites that claim they can do all that, but they probably have bugs galore.
Well, and if you think about, so on one of my clients, we're using Asana, we're using Slack, we're using the other one that you said. Why?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And it's the same shit posted on all 3.
Yep. So I just looked at this one Slack I'm on. There are 19 separate threads, and then like a kind of main lobby vestibule thread. And it's like, dude, I'm tagged on the majority of that shit, right? So I'm thinking to myself, like, eventually, because I'm a human being, I'm just gonna tune some of it out, and then I'm gonna eventually, miss stuff that's important, you know?
Right. And I don't understand why people don't understand that's how that works.
Yeah.
Same thing in a meeting. If you're talking about something that has nothing to do, I don't give 2 shits about HR or what the CFO is doing. I don't freaking care. I'm not going to listen. I'm going to clean my ears and play on Facebook under the table.
Yep.
And ignore the hell out of whatever's going on.
Right. Well, that's another good point too, is like I was at a joint once where on an employee engagement survey readout, so when they had like the consultant that did the engagement survey come in and explain the results to us, right? So on that deal, there were 8 executives at that company, and 4 of them were on Facebook under the table while the results were being read out. So I was like, okay, that's good. Like, that's a good sign. Like, they really care deeply about how engaged the people here are. So
when they're not engaged themselves.
No, not at all. So how could you expect that of others?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think like a lot of this comes down to like communication, obviously, better flow of communication. But some of those rules were good too. Like, I would love to have a fucking paddle in a meeting. And if someone's saying the exact same thing we've heard 10 times, I could hold it up and be like, don't do this anymore. That's cool. Or when guys run over on meetings, like, we get a nice ass happy hour at the end of the month out of it, you know?
Right.
In fact, I'm going to tweet that situation right now while we're talking, because I think that's worthy of being put into the digital universe.
It is. I'll go retweet you. The other thing that I want to say about this, though, too, is another thing that we can do that irritates the shit out of me. Like, if we're coming together to discuss a current project and people start bringing up other shit,
yeah,
you have to have a place to pin that, because you might need to come back to it, but then's not the time. So since people are not going to be paying attention to when they need to bring things up, because, humans are just human, you need to have someone that facilitates the meeting, that understands how meetings work, and is aggressive enough to say, that's a great thing, but we need to put a pin in that for now, because that's not why we're here.
Yep.
Because that's going to keep things moving along too, right?
Yep.
You might need to put air in your car tire, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to change the transmission fluid.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good analogy too, man. I like that. Yeah, so I mean, I think it is savable, but then I wonder if it's like psychologically, it's like part of the problem that we just need to feel busy, and that's why we keep calling these things, you know?
Which I think that's a lot of it, and it's unfortunate because busy does not equal productive.
No,
and if you're keeping your employees that should be doing something else in a meeting,
Yeah.
And your employees need to be able to say, am I necessary? Like, they need to also say, you invited me, but am I actually necessary to this? Does this have anything to do with me? Like, even if someone screws up and invites the wrong people, the people that have been invited need to have enough confidence in their ability to not lose their position, because that's what happens when you start acting like that. That they can go, am I really necessary? Like, when I work as a contractor for a lot of these companies, I'll ask that. Like, is that something that I'm needed for, or is that something you can shoot me a note on?
Right.
Later?
I've done that too on contract stuff. But like the problem with when you're an employee, if you're junior and you say that, you're perceived as like he's a slacker, or she's a slacker.
When the reality is that you'd rather just be getting your work done.
I want to do actual shit that's productive,
Right.
Yeah, that would be like that. Yeah, that should be the goal of work, but unfortunately, it is not. Often.
Well, again, I'm with you. I don't understand why we call so many meetings. I don't. We do though, and I have so many people go, well, let's set up a meeting. What for? Can you shoot me a note?
Yeah, for sure. Like, give me some rationale or justification.
If we don't have an agenda, I'm not meeting with you.
The other thing I wanted to touch on was like that Elon Musk thing that got some attention, where he said people can leave meetings if they don't see any purpose to them as they're going on. Some like classic managerial types fucking thought it was awful. I think it's a good idea because, like we were just saying, if you need to productively be getting work done and you have 3 hours of meeting scheduled and they're like completely stupid, like forget it, like forget it. Like you should be able to walk out.
But Elon Musk he hires people that are smarter than him. He's very loud about that.
Yeah.
He trusts that they're going to absolutely get their jobs done when they walk out the door. And they do, because we're constantly launching rockets and making Teslas and doing all this other shit that he does. And he makes a big deal out of hiring people that are smarter than him to do that on purpose. I would pose that a lot of people don't hire people. They're afraid to hire people smarter than them.
Yeah, for sure. They're terrified. Actually, they're terrified of it. Yeah.
I've actually had people recruiters tell me, I can't have you going into this job and explaining to them how much smarter than them you are to do this job. Like, you just need to keep your head down and do the job. Because I've been known to go, but that's not efficient and that's not the way it should be done.
Yeah. Like we were talking in the interview questions one about how like everybody asks that stupid question about where do you see yourself in 5 years, and like the real answer should be, oh, I'm gonna have your job.
Right. Right.
Hopefully you'll have another job, but I'm gonna have yours. But like if you said that in an interview, people would go nuts.
Right. And it's incredible, but that goes back to our first show about mediocrity, and it's not just men, but men do tend to kind of just get stuck in there.
Yeah. For both genders.
It goes back to the mediocrity thing and just being okay with hanging out with status quo, which people are. I'm not, but people are.
Right. For sure. I think that's like one of the fucking like worst things about work that we never seem to fully acknowledge. It's just like a bunch of mediocre people everywhere, unfortunately, and you just got to find your path through it. And I think I just described meetings in a nutshell. It's like a bunch of mediocre people everywhere, and you got to find your way through it.
Right. And it's mediocre people that they're the stay in your lane, keep your head down, don't cause a ripple. And I'm clearly not that kind of person. So this is why I don't live in corporate America.
No, I don't think I could make it. And then also, I'll just say this as a final note. This probably won't be up before that Tuesday, so you can cut it off around now. But like, I think it'll be cool to go on that Terra Elizabeth video.